So, welcome. I am very happy to be here today with Jason Norman, editor of Funicular. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, welcome. Jason is joining us from Canada. And thank you so much for coming out today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, why don't we jump right in? And do you want to tell us what, like, the origin story of your magazine? When did you start it? Why did you start it? And what is it all about?
I think it was sometime about late 2018. A friend of mine, we were just chatting about, the city that we live in and the kinds of literary things that happen here in Edmonton, where I live. And there's always lots of activity. There's lots of projects. There's lots of poets that live here. There's lots of writers that live here. People studying creative writing at the university and stuff like that. And just it came at a time where I was like, I don't know, I think there's room for something else. And my big thing is always the projects that I've done in the past. I'm always trying to bring together the community in my city, the writers community and the artist community. But I thought that there was room to do something that would do both. That would be like, let's do something that's made here that features hopefully writers from here, but also spreads its wings and kind of tries to touch people that are not only outside of the city and outside, but also outside of the country. And I thought there was room for that. And my friend Jeremy, who was a fellow writer at the time, just it seemed like a good time. We had energy. We had yeah, patience and time to spare. So we tried to get this thing off the ground. And I think it was sometime in 2019 when we had put the call out and started the whole thing and decided what we wanted it to be and how often we would publish. And it being publishing in print was something that was important. We wanted to try. I have a background of like kind of the online finding stories and stuff that I love on online journals and stuff was always a big thing for me. So I wanted to try to keep that tradition going, but to publish something physically in print was the aim and the project and so we got it off the ground there. And I was always like, I'm not a poet, but I love poetry and I wanted to publish poetry and fiction together, and I also wanted to feature flash fiction specifically alongside
Hmm.
like longer short fiction, I guess you could say, in terms of like the comparisons, just in the sense of the fact that if the readers would see that they are kind of two different things. So that's how we got started. And basically about 3 issues per year we would do. Took a couple breaks throughout the years. I can't believe it's been so many now, but took a couple breaks. But basically, we've done 2 a year at least, but 3 a year overall. And just the timing timing is different right now, but we just closed for I think what's going to be the 15th
Hmm.
issue.
That's great. So can you tell us about the name too? Every time I do a Google search for funicular, I get these like trolley cart.
The thingies, yeah.
Is it actually a thing? And was that thing the inspiration for the journal's name?
It was so the thing about that word is it used to be a word I could never remember what I was trying to say when I would see those things. I would always say the word vernacular instead
Ah.
of the word funicular. Um so that was kind of one, and then when I started to finally remember it, I was like, I do like how it sounds and it has the word fun in it. So when we were just throwing names around, that was one that was always front of mind.
Mm.
We had both separately, I think, been to Portugal. My friend Jeremy and I, who started the magazine with me, we had both separately been to Portugal, and I think, and there's the streetcars there, and they do have like funiculars, but also the streetcars and steep hills,
Mm.
and just kind of seemed like there was that imagery we were thinking of too. Also, fun, at the same time, the city here they were building one, a funicular to go down to this, from the kind of city streets down to this river valley spot, and they were actually building one in the city, which was actually just kind of a coincidence. But um, so it was really like it's a fun name to say. It's kind of like it did have some imagery that we were thinking of at the time, but it was really just like just kind of like a fun word to think of. And then I can finally remember it now, and now I never forget it. what I'm trying to think of. But I used to never I just could never I was like, "What are those? It's not a trolley, it's not a
Right.
streetcar." But, so yeah, that's kinda where that came from.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm curious about the Canadian. You might be the first journal editor based in Canada that I've
Oh,
spoken
cool.
to. So it sounds like in where you are, there's sort of a thriving literary scene. Have you felt, how do you feel in relation to the US lit magazine? Do you feel pressure like to come to, AWP or like these big
Yeah.
literary conferences, or do you just feel like you're kind of doing your own thing and
Well, I mean, I mean, I definitely feel envy about going to the
mm,
AW. I think I always think about it, and I'm thinking about it again. It's mainly because there's so many like I said before, I've kind of fell in love with flash fiction through like online journals and stuff like, and then a lot of those writers are American writers. So kind of following them on social media and stuff and being like, oh, I could maybe I'd see them there, or maybe I could meet them, or things like that. So it's like um in terms of I think it's kind of it's been kind of cool that because we started the magazine the way that we started it. I mean, it's not wildly different, but we didn't have a mandate. We didn't have a specific thing that we had to do. Like, we didn't have to only publish Canadians and stuff like that, because we weren't getting any kind of like specific funding for that reason or whatever. And it was just something that I thought it would be so cool to put out an open call. So I do think it's been, especially after having done so many issues of the magazine, how many American writers we get to publish, and it just kind of like mixes together. And I think when people read it, I always just think about that too, like what people are doing when they're reading the magazine. And then some writers are from Canada, some are from America, some are from Australia and England, and there's all kinds of expats that are in it. And when we read blind, so we don't really ever know where the people are from. So I just kind of like I always like the little family that we kind of build every issue that we do.
mhm,
Um, and I tried for a while. I'm gonna try again, but I have a little I made a well, I didn't make a map, but I put a map up on the wall, and I just started to put little push pins in the like where the writers were from. Um, I think I did that for maybe the first half. So that's kind of fun trying to get to and like I don't know, it's just kind of neat to have that connection. I don't know if how people feel about us being a Canadian magazine. I don't think I don't think there's a specific need to kind of make us kind of tell the world that. It's just
mhm,
you'll see it when you read the stuff, and you'll probably get it. But I think the other part was just to kind of see how you can kind of build this literary family all over the world.
yeah,
And so that was the big thing. And I think you know that's the main part. And so being all the way out here, I don't really feel like, especially the way that we started the magazine, we did so little events, and then COVID came, and we wanted to kind of go out and meet the people and meet the writers where they were and try to do more things in person. And then it just turned into be something where we're just had less and less time for.
yeah,
But especially when you mention AWP, it is something that always comes up. And I just think all the people that I could meet,
mm,
future contributors, past contributors, people that, like I said, I've become fans of for like over a decade of just, kind of following them on social media. So I
mhm,
don't know. I hope that people kind of think differently about maybe this part of the world when they're reading it. But it
mm,
is kind of cool that just basically through almost no prompting, um, people from Ohio and California and New York and all kinds of stuff are just sending us stuff, and we get to be maybe their first publishing experience and stuff. So yeah, that's a
mhm.
that's a very long answer.
No, 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 it's a great answer, and actually, I'm thinking of all the great Canadian journals, like, I'm thinking of, I think, Room and
Yep,
Malahat Review and
yep.
Fiddle. Do you ever band together in solidarity or
Jeremy, who I did this with, he stopped working on the magazine a few issues ago. He basically, he's got his own projects and stuff to do, and he was so instrumental in everything. And I forget who it is, but he tries to make up fake rivalries with these
Mm,
groups.
mm,
I think it's Malahat, or it's Fiddle. I think it's Fiddlehead actually. He tries to, whenever he sees a cover, if there's any kind of a color on their cover that we've used, he always just like jokes that they're copying us and stuff like that.
right.
But I've tried to do more things with ones here, like in our province.
Mm,
Um, there's a city rivalry here in Edmonton. Like
mm,
there's Edmonton and Calgary. There's that kind of sister city thing, and there's so many in Calgary that have a long tradition. That's the other kind of fun thing about in Canada. There's a lot of these magazines that have existed for like 20 or 30 years
mm,
because they're kind of rooted in these traditions of kind of either university writing programs or like nonprofit societies that started, in the 80s and stuff. So there's so many of these ones that have been doing things for so long. And like I said, so there's some stuff, where I'm trying to do more with the local, or at least places that are closer to us. But other than being like cheeky online,
mm,
not as much. But I do hope that they know that we exist.
mhm. And we have a question here. Have you noticed a difference between Canadian and American writing?
Um, I can't. I mean, in terms of the style, I can't tell the difference except for like place names and things like that.
Mm,
When people are talking about the subway or different like regional kind of like places like that. Um, yeah, I don't think about it a ton. There's nothing that really sticks out. I think it's usually more about the background of the writer and like kind of like what paths that they took. Like if
mm,
they're definitely more established and they went through like these MFA routes and stuff like that, they kind of feel there's like more. I don't know. It just feels like there's more coming from them. And then I think um, the Canadian writers that have the same path, even though it's Canadian, I don't know. It still feels a little bit different. But I think overall, I don't think I can really tell unless they name drop something or if they use some kind of regional, like if they call something a toque,
mm.
they're going to be a Canadian, and stuff like that. So, and there's definitely not a lot of crossover. Like, I don't know, there's not a lot of writers in Vancouver talking about, I don't know, like telling stories like about people in New York and stuff
Mm,
like people are writing about kind of like what they're familiar with or close with. But um, definitely, I haven't even, I always try to guess. I'm like, oh, I wonder where they're from. I wonder if I've read them before. But in terms of the just straight up, I could never pick them out of a lineup probably
mm,
between
mhm.
like American and Canadian, just straight up writing.
Yeah. Are you very active on the online community? Because it's interesting. It sounds like you find a lot of writers that you like online, and I found you. I had a
Yeah.
last minute cancellation, and you just, I put out a call on Twitter or X, and you just jumped right in, which was
Yeah.
fantastic. So do you see online engagement as like part of your job or part of something that's of interest to you personally and sort of building your literary community?
I think I've always felt like that's the closest I am to being a fan of things. Like when you're a fan and you're just like, oh,
Mhm.
it's them, and they're doing something. And it's like, so it really is like that's the closest I get to that is just following these writers that I like, or I've read their books, or I've read a lot of their stories, and then I just kind of like follow them. And sometimes you can do comments, or even just if they just usually just like kind of random stuff. And then it's the same thing. You get a like from them. It's different than just getting a like from somebody else. So I think there's that. And I think that in terms of like, obviously, a few years ago, Twitter was probably a little bit better. For now, things are a little bit just jankier. And then
Mm,
that was the main place. And I know there's some of these other ones. And I know Chelsea, who works on the magazine now, she's been trying more on Blue Sky and stuff like that. And it's just like that thing about getting into the habit of finding people where they are
mhm,
and stuff like that. But it was just such a big thing for me about how I was exposed to these writers. So I just kind of want to be out there and talking about writing with them. It is a little bit different, when you do live in another country like Canada that feels like it should be so similar, but it's not.
mhm,
So you still just want to feel like you're kind of like on the pulse or like feeling like the same things that everybody else is feeling about writing. And I think there are, of course, huge differences between stuff and like the way that we think about over here, like the way our government supports us or our local kind of communities support us. I think it's probably different than the issues that like American writers have in their different regions that they're in. But I think in the online place, we're probably more from the same place. Like we're from the internet when we're on the internet, so then we're kind of
Mm,
chatting that way. So I like doing that stuff more. I like when I engage as the magazine, like on social media. Just that kind of comes through this idea of like how seriously we take ourselves and don't take ourselves, and just that it's so much fun to kind of discover new writers through literary magazines,
mhm,
and whether it's online or in print, it's so much fun. And then it's so much fun to kind of champion them online,
mm,
watch them kind of go about their, either you, like I said, you could be their first publication or their 50th, but just kind of watch how you get to be a part of their path and stuff like that. And obviously something like a Twitter is still the best, or whatever is the best place for that. So I do like feeling like I'm a part of that community, but I also feel like that's the place where I go and like, oh yeah, like, oh, she's doing that now. Yeah, I really am the most like a fan probably
mhm,
on with any other thing. I am the most about like writers and writing on there.
mhm, mhm. Is it correct to say or to think that there's more support for the arts in Canada, more public support than there is in the US? I sort of have the impression that there's kind of more infrastructure set up for artistic endeavors.
I wish I knew more about like the other side. It does feel, just in general, being ignorant of the other side, it feels like, yeah, like you said, there is an infrastructure. There is like, I have a city arts um community, there's a
Mm,
provincial arts community, and then there's a national arts community. And they all have grant projects and grant streams for individuals and groups, and for things like literary magazines, or for writers working on it. And I know that those things probably exist in the States, but it does feel like they're a given in the sense that they are there, and they feel like they are kind of like perennially there.
mhm,
And we're not kind of always fighting about what's going to, it doesn't matter, at least still, like who the government is or whatever happens. Like we still know that those things are kind of there. Not that we're going to get them, but the opportunities and stuff like that are there. They are, from what I hear, they're definitely more, the competition is stiffer every year for trying to get these things.
mm,
But yeah, like I don't know almost anything about the other side. It does feel like there's just like a general sense that there is this kind of like a thing there in terms of the support, like in terms of, yeah, like public money, or like
mhm,
government money.
mhm.
Um, the support in terms of like from the public, I think that's probably the same. It just depends on where you go.
Right, right. Okay, so focusing now on the magazine, it sounds like you do flash fiction, longer fiction, and poetry. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And for the longer fiction, is what is the word limit?
I think it used to be. I think it might still say it's 5,000, but that's too long. I think we. I don't know. That's too long. I think also the magazine is getting shorter because of like when it weighs too much, it costs more to send it
Yeah,
in the mail. This is like the behind the scenes.
right.
Um, I think 3,000 is like a good number. I think we
Mm,
might have went to 5 and we went back,
mm,
because like 3,000 is a good amount on the that would be like in our magazine. That would be like probably like almost 15 pages
right.
of the magazine. The ones that we get, the longer ones that we get, are probably in the twos,
Mhm,
in the 2000s. But yeah, and then people ask about a creative nonfiction, and I always just say, just don't tell me,
mm.
and I'll just assume that it's fiction, and then you know, I don't, yeah, I don't know what the point would be for me to know that it's, you know what I mean? If it's creative nonfiction, it could work either way in terms of me, a stranger reading
Right,
it.
right.
So
That's
that's what
interesting.
I just tell people when they ask. They're like, "What about creative nonfiction?" I just say, "Just don't tell me," because
That's
it's not like we're publishing fantasy and stuff anyway.
right,
So
right.
you know, it's stuff about people for the most
Mhm,
part. So
mhm. And so you publish a little bit online. I saw there were a few flash pieces, but then most of it is in print.
yeah, I'm trying to get back to a regular schedule. So we tried out a new submission stream manager program thing. So over the summer, we kind of did a call for Flash to use as a tester for that, but also to try to get more Flash on the website.
Mm.
And I'm trying to get to a regular schedule of some kind. It has been a while, but I used to publish 2 things a week on there. And the
Mm.
idea was also that what you saw online wasn't what was in the magazine. It was always different. And in some cases, when I used to do it more regularly, like someone, for example, might have 2 pieces published in the magazine, the print magazine, and then a third would go online. And for the most part, that was because we just liked so many of the things that they sent us. And but eventually you have to cut things off somewhere. So if the writer was okay with it, then we could publish online. Um, so that's still the plan. I want to get into a more regular, like we fell down a hole for a while. I was trying to keep it as a regular thing because, like I was talking about before, just being in that tradition of discovering writers that way. Um, and maybe it points people to the magazine eventually, or even just submitting to the magazine. But if it points people to buying, we usually say, "Oh, did you like this?" They have two poems in the print issue, or they have another flash piece in the print issue. So I'm going to try to do more of that. And now maybe with this new system, I'll be able to collect pieces on a different basis that's more regular, and then post things. But um, yeah, that's the plan is that the plan is that they're different, but yeah.
Mhm. Can you talk about why you chose to publish in print? It seems like it would be so cost effective to publish online, but then I looked at the print journal, it looks beautiful. So
Oh,
surely that must be expensive and a lot of work. So what goes into the commitment to print?
at the time, I don't know, I just felt like there was room for a thing, and maybe that was thinking more about our community, and we were like, "Oh, I think there's room for a thing."
Mhm.
Um, and we were like, "Oh, it won't be too big, and it won't be too this, and we could, ship it easier and blah, blah, blah." So, it's such a big thing to get published and not have the caveat that it's online and you didn't get paid for it.
Mhm.
Um, and like after all the things that I've said, and even though like all the ways that I discovered so many great writers was reading Flash online for free or reading poetry online for free, but it's still different. And if we could do it a different way, I would, in terms of like having a model where we could pay the stuff that would pay the writers that were published online and all that kind of stuff. But we just felt like, well, if we're going to do it in print, then obviously we're going to charge for it. And then if we charge for it, we should be able to, pay the writers that are in it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think it's still a big deal for people to have that credit. Not like I think that there is a big difference in terms of like how you are published, but I do think it is a little easier for everybody to explain. I'm
Mhm.
in this magazine, this one right here, right? So I think that was, yeah, and I think when when my partner Jeremy, when we started, I think he saw it as an opportunity to make, like, we weren't making books, but we were making a physical thing, and to him, I think that was exciting about the creative process that went into everything about. And if you ever see the magazine, I should send you one. If you ever see the magazine, like everything is kind of like done, purposefully to kind of make it look good, like make it look good on the outside, make it look good on the inside, kind of feature the people that are meant to be featured, but still kind of have this sense that, you are just kind of, you're reading this thing that was purposefully kind of curated and put together. And, um, once again, doesn't take itself seriously as an entity, but takes the writing inside
Mhm.
seriously. So, and then yeah, so there are so many challenges with that, and so much stuff costs money, and mail costs so much money, and somebody gets published and they live in Italy, and I have to send their copy to Italy, and it's like it's never gonna get there. They're gonna send it by boat. It's just, but sometimes they live in normal places, but it's just like it is cool to have that, and it is cool to see it, and especially now that we've done so many, it's cool because you're just like, oh, there's so many. But it was also an opportunity to kind of be creative and artistic in the way that I definitely can't be. But Jeremy, when he was working on it at the time, definitely put all of his kind of other talents to work when doing that, and it's something that I have to really try in a different way to keep that quality going. And I think that's the other word, is like quality. We wanted to show that there's like so much quality behind the product that has, people's words in it.
Mhm. So speaking of the product, can you tell us what kind of work are you looking for? And I should say, like when I hear the word funicular, I immediately think of humorous and lighthearted. But then I went to the site and there was a flash fiction piece, which really honestly blew me away, but I did not find it funny at
Which
all.
one was that? Like
Um,
the latest one?
it was Love Life.
Love Life, yeah.
Yeah, and I was almost, in tears at the end, actually. It was beautiful, but it was not what I expected.
I do
Um,
think that, yeah, that part is I think that part is I don't know if I think people most of the time like it. I think in some ways it's a tension breaker in terms of like there is this sense that like I keep saying, the magazine itself is not taking itself seriously as this um kind of like canonical
mm,
thing, um but we do take the stuff inside seriously. So in terms of what we're looking for, like, yeah, trying to put that into words, like, it's just like, I think everybody wants to be a little bit surprised. You're going to read maybe hundreds of things. So what usually comes through a lot of the times it's the voice of the if it's the voice of that person. And it's like everybody that's a writer, you just want to be understood. You want your idea to be understood and you want it to get through. So you're going to do that in a variety of ways. And then if you are successful, then we're going to keep reading it. And then if we used to talk about there's so much violent imagery now where you're just like, oh, it's like a gut punch or like a thing. It's usually just like a surprise. You just want to get kind of a new way of looking at something. So you kind of want to be jarred out of especially with poetry, you just kind of want to be jarred out of your just usual way of looking at stuff. And like the poets do like such a good job. It's usually um we usually get so much we get so much poetry, but then you read 100 things and then you read the 101st thing and you're just like, oh yeah. So it sounds so simplistic, like it's hard. It's like it's easier, I think, to go the reverse if you read the magazine and you're like, I write stuff kind of like this because I think you'd figure it out. But it's like, we do want a little bit of surprise. We do want a little bit of that emotional kind of punch. We
mm,
do want a new way of kind of looking at, that's what Flash does so well, right? It's always just it's a way of putting something under a microscope. It could be a marriage or it could be literally like crossing the street or whatever. It's something that's so simple or banal. So, and poetry does that as well too. It's just like you're taking something so simple, but yeah, it's like it's impossible to put into words without sounding so stupid. But it's nothing crazy. Like it's still when we send rejections, we're just like, this is just the opinions of two people. Also, we can't publish everything. Um, but once the product comes together, we're always quite proud of it because we go, oh yeah, this is us, but also in 20 different
mm.
ways. It's not always the same, but sometimes, like I always joke, there's always going to be a theme that pops up after the fact, like certain animals or colors or things like that. You're like, why did we keep? I think the last issue had like 4 ducks in it in different pieces. I'm like, why so many ducks? But there's good duck pieces. So yeah, it just sounds so stupid to try to explain it, but like, um, you know, it's very difficult, obviously, to put something together that people are going to like. And when you send stuff out and you're sending it to this big pile of things and you want it to stand out, and I just think like, you know, you will figure out the way that it's going to stand out. And if it doesn't stand out to me, it will stand out to somebody else. I always like, and some of the things like we do get rid of off the top where we just think about there's lots of fantasy or like genre that we're probably not going to get into. So there's that. Um, the poetry stuff, like I said, we do get a lot of it. So like there's some stuff that's still written in a very kind of classical way. That's just the way I kind of put it. It's kind of like it feels like the romantic kind of tradition or whatever. So some of that just feels so dated. So that's hard to kind of it feels hard to connect with. Not like we're looking for the most modern or postmodern things, but I think those are just some examples of some stuff you can kind of cut off the top. Um, but yeah, it's always just, I mean, you just want a new way of looking at a certain thing. I mean, sometimes the language really comes through, but a lot of the times it's the idea and then it's the way that you can kind of just phrase your idea or kind of get me to look at, something in that way. But It's so difficult until you start to read it, and I think you can kind of get what our sensibility is by reading more of it. That was the other reason why I like the idea of posting stuff online, is because you could kind of say, "Oh, okay, like I don't write like that," or like I don't write like 20% maybe, but you're like, "Oh, if I write like 75% like that, like maybe this thing will work."
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, like I could just go in circles, but
Could you take us through a recent short story that you published, that any either in the most recent issue or a few issues back, one that stands out that was an immediate yes for you and the other editors, and maybe tell us a bit about why?
I wanted to do a flash one really quick, but now I can't think of anything. Oh, there's one right there. Just a sec. I'm just gonna. I don't want to look weird on the camera. I'm still here.
Okay.
I just had to reach over the table. Um. So there was one about there was a. So I'll go quickly, but there's one about a basically a woman whose job it was to like sort the doll heads at the doll factory.
Hmm.
So we're already kind of off to a good start here. Um, yeah, and then these other ones, these flash ones, it's just like flash. It's so tough, right? You got about a sentence or two, and you're just like, I'm either with you or I'm not with you.
Right.
There, in terms of the longer short story, there was one that we published, and they're actually a local writer. It was called Don't. Um, and it's kind of like these other ones that I really like about, I don't know, it's like small town life, family with like a lot of kid, a lot of kids, right? There's like five sisters or whatever the hell, and father's nowhere to be seen, and mother's like doing all kinds of stuff. And then you just kind of like they just start peeling the layers back of
Right.
like so there's the inner lives of the kids. There's the kind of shit that they get into that they don't tell, mom, or don't tell her, or don't tell. And then you start to realize, oh, maybe the mom has some things that she doesn't tell the girls and just stuff. And then you just kind of like, um, in a very, I mean, a longer short story piece. And it's like, it's just this kind of like domestic thing, lots of sisters, people growing up, the older sisters taking care of the younger ones type of thing. And then, you just keep coming back to this idea of like, you know, kind of don't tell, or like, the secret. Um, and then it goes, and I think it does that thing too, where sometimes it really works where you get to the end of the story, but then you're like, no, we're going to go a little bit further. And here's another example of this. And we're a little bit older, and now we're away from the town, and something else is happening. But it's, once
Hmm.
again, it's like, it's the same. It's like we encountered, some strangers, or we encountered like some strange men, and like, the ways that people are kind of acting when they're trying to get, either intimidate other people, or, are they being nice? Are they trying to intimidate this, strangers in a different town, all that kind of stuff. And just that kind of, it turns up that creep factor a little bit, that kind of like Flannery O'Connor, like,
Mhm.
were these people up to? And then kind of once again, then bringing it back to this, like, I won't tell if you don't tell idea.
Mhm.
So it's that's, I guess it's that same thing that I was trying to say. You're taking something that seems so kind of banal, or just so kind of normal on the surface, and you're taking us into the inner lives of these people.
Mhm.
But also she's got a little, there's a little, I don't know what you call that. There's a little trick to it. It kind of comes back to the title, right? This don't, the idea of the single word title, right? Don't tell, don't ask, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like fun, but like there's like lots of menace under there. So um and like when you're reading it, you do know pretty quickly, when, especially, it's just like the language is like, I don't know, like some of this I'm trying not to say what I thought after I knew who the writer was, because it's
Mhm.
like now I know who they are. So I'm like, oh, you're an accomplished writer. You know what you're doing. But at the
Mhm.
time, you can at least see that they're confident in their
Mm.
skill, and they're confident in the way that they're going to tell the story. And I think, like, once again, you're not overconfident, so you realize that it might not work with these editors, but it might work with other editors. So I think you can kind of feel that, the idea that I think clearly there's a lot of reality that is in this story. Like, this person probably has a lot of sisters or whatever. So there's that. And like, I don't know the difference either way. Like I was saying, I don't really know. So it doesn't matter. Maybe this whole thing was a true story. So that was the other kind of reason why I said, just don't tell me, just put fiction on it. Like I'm not going to know. So, um, there's a sense that they've lived in this world too, whether they've lived in it in their imagination or in real life. Like, you kind of want to you kind of want to feel like the clothes have been kind of worn for a little while. So, that was one to me. Like you just kind of know, and you're like, oh yeah, this person's here, and then you follow along. And I think sometimes you're just not going to get to the end of these pieces. There's just so much to read, and you're just like, I don't know, I'm just not. You think about how distracted you are, like
Mhm,
after one page or after 4 pages, and then you're like, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna keep going. So then when you get to the end, you're already kind of like, well, I stayed to the end. That's pretty good. But if you got to the end and then it was that kind of like that thing, that satisfying thing, and you keep thinking about it, that's always something too. Like the amount of times I see people on Twitter or online and they go, "Oh, I still think about that short story that like that's the coolest part, right?" Because
mhm,
that they're just these images. It's like it's a song. It's like a song, but it's not because you're really just thinking about you know this image or what he or she said at the time. So the fact that stuff can stay with you, I think you
mhm,
really want that. um so yeah, you kind of get to the end and you're like, oh yeah, they did it, they stuck the landing. And I think
mhm,
sometimes if you write something that well, if you don't stick the landing, like you still want to forgive it. So that's kind of nice, right, where you've kind of built up this goodwill in a story.
mhm,
But then when they do it, you're just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, well, we have to take this, like this is great. The longer pieces are always like a nice little for a magazine that's kind of like always like one page or two. It's kind of nice to have a few
mhm,
longer in there if you can. So you kind of it feels nice as well in terms of like putting it in the magazine. It feels like a little anchor. I know like obviously lots of people like longer short stories, the people that like short stories. So and if I was a person that was trying to sell people on short stories, these are the kinds of things that I would, use to do that. So, um, and then Flash would be the other way. I wouldn't look for the same thing. Like with Flash, it would be kind of like, you're trying to do the elevator pitch basically for the Flash, like right away. It's about a woman that separates the good doll heads from the bad doll heads in the factory, and she goes on a date. And you're like, okay, here we go. Or it's about a woman that, it's like this, and you're going, okay, like let's see how long you can keep that Flash going for. So,
mhm,
um, but yeah, if you still think about it, even with all the stuff we publish, if you still think about, the people or, like I said, an image or two or the ending of something, that should work with other people too, not just the editors.
mhm. Are you open to speculative work, or do you wanna see work more grounded in realism?
We've definitely done some speculative. It's always in that same kind of way. It's like they're not talking too much about the year was
Mhm,
2655, and there was like one, I forget how many years ago it was just called The Cube, and I think it was just about like this kind of cube, and made people start acting weird or, whatever
mm,
it was. There was just a little sci-fi-ishness to it or whatever. That was clearly like in the speculative kind of ballpark. So
mhm,
there's usually like stuff like that or like a not too distant future or like, kind of possible realities or possible things like that. But yeah, usually we're trying to deal with like humans and not aliens, stuff like that. But I mean, definitely like people that are flirting with the speculative, like those are the kinds of ones that we would definitely pay attention to. You
mhm,
don't have to worry about too much. Like a lot of the times it's hard, right? You have to get a lot of exposition out for these kinds of stories. You have to kind of tell them about the world that you're going to be kind of inhabiting. So a lot of that for us, it'll take me out of the kind of reading experience. It doesn't feel like a funicular one.
mhm,
So if I don't need a setup in terms of like what year is it, what planet it, like yeah, like if it's set on another planet, it's going to be tough for
mhm,
this particular thing. But
mhm,
if it's sometimes it's nice though if you read a story and then you get to the end and you're like, actually, I don't know if this took place on Earth or not. So you're like, that's kind of cool. Um, but I definitely think yeah, the spec has a better chance than something more fantastical. I think.
mhm. Would you say, because you mentioned, the element of creepiness a few times, would you say that's something you like to see, like some kind of undercurrent of something a little bit odd?
Well, it's always like I talk about with Flash, it's always about the iceberg, right? It's always about you see that picture of the iceberg and there's like 80%. it's all about the subtext, right? So it's
Mm,
like usually subtext is like creepiness, but not always. It's always just like things left unsaid or like, things unrequited and stuff like that. So I think if you can get subtext out like quick and get the reader thinking about that subtext, like, oh, something's going on here, like that's the best part. Cause like for me, that's what I think about when I think about Flash and good short fiction is like, think about all of the things that a reader does when they're reading short fiction versus a novel. And I think
mm,
that those are the things that a reader does. It's like they're thinking about subtext, they're thinking about all the things that aren't being said or aren't being done at the time or what people are thinking. And I think so if you give us a lot more of that iceberg to kind of think about how big it is down there,
mm,
then so it doesn't always have to be creepiness, but I think definitely like subtext or like, the kind of unknown, the unsaid
mhm.
stuff for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, like a lot of the stuff ends up being like very creepy. very, very creepy. Yeah.
Can you tell us some common pitfalls that you see in work? So you described the experience of like just being distracted. I know exactly what you're talking about. Like you want to get into something, you want to be, totally immersed in this world, but it's just not clicking. Is there anything that you can pinpoint and say, like, writers, this is just not a good way to start your story, or just sort of identify things that you see a
Yeah.
lot you can tell writers to avoid?
Well, okay, so starting at the very, very, very beginning. So because hopefully the idea is that other writers are going to think about this when they're thinking about submitting to other magazines, not just mine. So I think if it looks like you didn't read the guidelines,
Mm.
it's going to be tough. It's like showing up late to a Zoom interview. It's kind of like, what the hell does this guy think? Who does he think he is? So there's that. I think you're kind of already fighting it a tiny bit. Sometimes I don't know if people talk about this all the time, but I think the font stuff has got to like. I think you need a serifed font, and like maybe the spacing needs to kind of be kind of you need to have some spacing,
Mhm,
but like some of the now I just feel like it's just hard to read. Like and then if it's hard to read physically, it's just going to be hard to kind of engage with. Not that it always works, but I feel like you're doing yourself a big favor. Now, once again, read the guidelines, but if you give yourself like a serif font, I think that's probably why so many of these places suggest like a Times New Roman
mhm,
type of deal. Um I think I still get I don't know, a lot of this stuff is still so personal. I still get stuck in like old pieces of advice I've heard in the past, like don't start with dialogue. And then when people start with dialogue, and I go, yeah, I kind of get why people didn't like this in the past.
mhm,
So, but I think like if the idea is that you want to be understood as a writer in your story, you want the story to kind of come across, the more it feels like you're trying to do that, then the more I'm going to see that. And
mhm,
then it feels like you're not kind of you didn't this story didn't come out of a not like it has to come out of a natural unforced place, but it feels too forced.
mhm,
So I think I will see that. um I think I think some of the stuff is just um it's just too early in whatever this writer is trying to do at the moment. It's either just like they're trying out something that's going to work later or is not going to work for me, and I can kind of tell. And it's like the stuff that I wrote either when I was trying a new style or trying something else. It's not that's just like a personal thing. I can just kind of see it sometimes, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is eventually going to work, or you're mimicking a style. And I think everybody does that, right? You start to mimic a thing and you're like, I really like how this writer does it. I'm going to try it. And eventually you're going to get to do it the way that you want it to
mhm,
look. But for a while it is going to look too much like the other person's style or that other way. So um I think like sometimes it's just going to be early, and then I think probably other editors would feel this too. They're just like, no, this isn't for us because of that. Like they're going to get there. It's just not. That's the other issue, is that we don't have time to edit. And sometimes I think that's really not the job probably of this magazine. It's like I think imperfection and all, we want, if we liked it, we want to publish it.
Mhm.
So because once again, it's kind of a snapshot in time. It's we like this at the moment for the magazine right now. And to be like, "Oh, I like this, but I wanna spend, 5 hours." We don't have time. That's not my job for this specific thing. Sometimes I love the idea of working with a writer and being like, "I think you can get the great story out of here," but, like, like I said, for me specifically and for this magazine specifically, we just don't have the time for that kind of stuff. So then you just have to realize that, it's not going to work in that sense. So the in terms of like pitfalls, it's not really a pitfall. It's just something that if you are frustrated with the process of like rejection, those are the kinds of things that you might be just encountering. Is
Mhm.
that you're it's just the maturation of that story is just not ready for those
Mm.
specific people. And but there are the other things like maybe if it's like the guidelines were or the guidelines weren't adhered to in a certain way, you're going to kind of be riding your bike uphill a little bit.
Mhm.
Um but yeah, I try to always focus on that stuff. It's like the numbers are high, there's a lot of things that come in, there's only a certain set of eyes. Like we try to put our eyes on the stuff. I don't like to use the term, well, I don't use it, the term slush pile. I don't call it that. We have the submissions. That's what, like, I don't understand, at least for us, like, I don't, it just doesn't make any sense because we have a call for submissions and we get submissions. So why would I call things a slush pile? So we want to read everything that comes in, but you're going to only read so much when you only have so much time and all the other stuff. So
Mhm.
sometimes your story just got rejected because it's the 16th thing that they read in a row. And they just their eyes are tired or their brain is tired and they just didn't want it. So I would focus more if you can get those things where you can get some positives. I would always focus on if someone writes you back and was like, we really love this piece, but we have too many stories about whales this time, and you're like, oh, they really liked it. Well, that's good, I got close. I'd focus more on that than the stuff that my whale story didn't have to make it
Mm.
one of the three great whale stories in this issue this time. But I do think, yeah, some of those things like not following, not seeming like you've read the magazine or anything about the magazine at all are tough because it just feels like you're just kind of like, well, why am I spending my time reading this when you didn't spend, a couple seconds like trying to figure out how we wanted you to send it to us.
Mm.
Um, so stuff like that, like um I also think there's personal stuff too. It's like I can't do dialogue. I can't do it.
Mm.
So when I read a lot of dialogue, I'm just like, yeah, maybe I don't like it. But I don't know. So sometimes there's like lots of dialogue. I'm like, oh, we don't have much time. Like we got to go. Maybe it's the editor in me, and where I'm like, oh, this is gonna take up like the whole page is like just this part. Like I don't know. Maybe it's the editor. I'm just thinking of the layout. Um, or maybe it's just because I just like narrative kind of voice more. So there's so much stuff that's just like personal stuff, and I would never say just like this is a bad story. Like you're gonna get there like one way or the other. Eventually. So some of the other technical things are just things that you're just gonna set yourself up already closer for like success.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Are you sending out your own work to lit mags? It sounds like you are, and you're writing flash fiction also.
I'm trying to do it more, but I haven't done it a ton
Mm.
lately. Like every excuse, but I really should have no excuses. But I still try to. I always like when there's like a call for something that in a short period of time where I can get something new done, or maybe there's something that I had for a while that I think would fit. Um, so I try to. I That's the thing I love the most is trying to write something that will fit for a specific place or like a specific like contest or whatever.
Mhm.
Because I don't get to the point where, or at least lately, where I just have a lot of stuff like sitting in a drawer because of the stuff that I write that's so short. It's kind of easier to be like, oh yeah, they want something. I'm gonna try and like try to fit it for them. I don't know, but I try to. I try to. Lately, I've done okay, but definitely not writing as much as I could be.
Yeah, editing takes time, I hear.
This thing, yeah, whatever we're calling
Right.
this, yeah, it does take time. This time I think, was less because I think I've put the call out a week later than we were supposed to, but in terms of the time, I've still spent the same amount of time, but yeah, it's felt okay so far, but we're still kind of in the middle of it.
Yeah. So when are you generally open for submissions? How long is the submission window? How long is response time
Yeah.
generally? And when is the next submission period?
So based on, so we'll talk about the print magazine first. So for the print, we print the same basically time every 4 months. So that means basically every 4 months we're also looking for submissions. So this time was end of August into September. So then 4 months from end of August would be basically, yeah, end of November into December, or the other way around, or end of no, end of December is too late. I just keep working backwards. We published the end of October, the end of February, and the end of June.
Mm,
So then you work 90 days back from each of those things, and that's when we should roughly be opening for the print. So basically, end of August, end of May. Is that right? End of, yeah, November, I think. Somebody that's good at dates. Because yeah, because of the model that we kind of go on for a variety of reasons, we're kind of trying to do that where we work backwards. We're just like,
mm,
we're going to print the thing is going to come out on the same basically day.
mm,
So February, like I said, February 27th, October 27th, or June 27th, October 27th. Um, so the next one would be, yeah, probably the end of November for the print. We right now we only open for 2 weeks because we used to get everything we needed in 2 weeks. So a month was just twice as much stuff to read. Um, so that's what we do now. Based on what I just said about how our publishing schedule is, you should hear fairly quickly.
mm,
We do have an option where if you pay, you can hear back in a week. Um, you can think of it in two ways. You can think of it as paying for a response in a week, or you think of it as paying to have your stuff read first,
mm,
because that's what's going to happen. Um, in terms of the statistics, it's like it's always all over the map. It's never
mm,
like the people that pay don't get in more than it's different every single time. But if you do want to just kind of know and hear, and also it's just a way to support the magazine, we do that, and then we'll let you know within a week. Otherwise, you'll hear before the magazine comes out. So probably within 60 days, you'll probably hear. Um, and if we do create another system with posting online, there might be more calls. Like I think in the summer we did that one as a test, but we might try something like that where we do off and on months of poetry submissions and flash submissions. Those obviously work the best online, where we can kind of try to just have more of a of a presence in that way. Like now that we don't use a certain other program for submissions, like now it doesn't matter opening or closing. Like we can kind of just remain open if we wanted to, but it's better to kind of have these like the what do you call it, concentrated calls. So those are the times officially for the print, and they'll always kind of be the same. But if we do more online, there might be more regular thing there too, where every month there's some reason to kind of send something in.
mm. Sure. And do you ever have openings for readers, or if somebody's listening to this and they think this sounds great, I want to get more involved with this magazine? Is that something that somebody could do?
In the past, we've definitely done it where we've wanted volunteer readers. Unfortunately, I mean they've been volunteers because that's all we could do. I felt bad for a while because for a lot of times lately, we would get a lot of submissions,
Mm,
and I would usually send the volunteers about as much as they could handle, and they would usually kind of tap out, and which is kind of the reason why we just like doing it ourselves in the past. I think a lot of readers just wanted to do a good job, and they just want to, and we just kept saying there's only going to be so many things in the, like it's really just a numbers game. We just need you
mm,
to kind of go through these things. So I think we're kind of up and down with it. We had a guest poetry editor this time that basically was in charge of all the poetry, which kind of took a lot off my plate this time because I usually read way more of the poetry, or all of the poetry. Um, and I'm not a poet, but I love the stuff we get to publish. So there are opportunities up and down. We don't have anything regular. We don't have anything kind of like planned.
mhm,
We do try to, like, now, like Chelsea Stickle tries, like, she'll read all the flash, I'll read all the short fiction, and then the poetry, we'll see what happens in the future. And we also might try this thing with guest editors, where then it kind of spreads the work around where maybe we don't need as much help. This
Mhm.
time around, also we got less submissions, so been a little bit easier to start. We usually get like way more, so just waiting through that. But it's always been great. Like a couple times we put out the call and be like, "Hey, do you want to help? You
Mhm.
know, if you could read 50 things this week, that would be great. Just like let us know if anything is really, really standing out." But it just conflicts sometimes with just that idea of like, well, you know, who's going to be in charge of kind of the final say on a lot of these things. If
Yeah.
people were paying for the response, it would be an editor that would be reading it. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, stuff comes up. We'll see, and then maybe with online, maybe that'll be more of an opportunity if we can keep that
Mhm.
schedule more.
So when you say you put out the call, that's on X
You,
or yeah,
yeah,
people should
usually
follow
it's
you
social.
and find you and
Yeah,
yeah.
usually Instagram or X would be the
Yeah.
main ones. The website is just usually for, hey, there's a new issue. Here's how
Mhm.
to submit, or here's how to buy it. Um, we don't have a lot of like blog stuff or like update stuff on there, so it'd really mostly be the social media.
Okay. And one final question. Sorry, I've been moving around a lot because
No,
the,
I
the
yeah,
song
yeah.
is like following me, but
I thought that
um,
was gonna happen to me, but yeah.
I'm sort of shifting here. One final question. This is something I ask all Lit Mag editors. Just I'm curious. I know it's a lot of work, and I'm sure you have other things going on in your life. So, what keeps you motivated? What keeps you inspired? What keeps you doing the work of editing a Lit Mag?
Well, I really like, when you read the stuff that you like and you're like, I'm going to publish this and, they're going to be our lit mag buddy. I think that's super fun. And I like kind of creating this little family um, in that sense. Like, so I really like that. I've always said, well, when I was in, I did my master's in England like a long time ago, and I met a great group of writers that became friends, and a few of friends of mine. We started a little zine mag thing, and just had so much fun working on it together, and just kind of with that spirit and that joie de vivre kind of thing. And I've wanted to always kind of just chase that feeling.
Yeah.
So, but I also feel that, I mean, I want these things to work. I want writers to have these opportunities, and I want to grow, whether it's my local community of writers or just overall.
Mhm.
And I can, like, I have time that I'm not spending on my own writing. I have the time. I have some of the resources to do this. Like, I have this time, and I really want it to work, and I want to do that. And it's just not killing me to do it. So I want to do it. And I do think if people can do things like this for their artistic community, that they should.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't have to start a magazine if they don't want to, but I just think I can. And it's like my way of kind of, I don't know, it's just like putting in this, like, what is that called? Like sweat equity. Is that a thing? It's just like work. It's just like work, just, I don't know, I can do this. It's like, there is like a labor part of it, but it's really just like so much of that stuff when you find the good stuff and you love it. And then you're just like, oh, now they did this and then went and did that. So
Mhm. Mhm.
that's fun. You get to be a fan in a different way. And I've always liked being a champion of writers that, I admire. So I get to do that in my way. Yeah, I don't know, I'm not turning people into superstars, but it's like you just never know who you're gonna find. So I do like that process a lot.
Yeah. I totally get that. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Jason. This was great. Wonderful. Congrats on the magazine. It looks great. And hello to Canada.
Hello back, and thank you very much. And I'm extremely sorry for being late.
Oh, no
I was
worries. No
very,
problem.
very rude.
No, no, no
Don't
problem.
tell the recording that I was late.
I won't. I'll try to cut that out. And thanks, everyone. Great to see you. And I will see you soon.